The sound of a palm striking flesh is distinct. It cuts through the low hum of jazz and clinking crystal like a gunshot. In the opulent dining hall of the Gilded Oak Country Club, time didn't just stop, it shattered. One moment, Sterling Vance, the tech world's golden boy, was holding court. The next, his pregnant wife was on the floor, clutching her cheek, and the room fell into a deathly silence. But the real shock wasn't the violence. It was the man who jumped over the mahogany bar, a lowly bartender with scarred knuckles who didn't just check on the victim. He looked the billionaire CEO in the eye and said, "You just bankrupt your own company, Sterling." Because that bartender wasn't staff. He was the owner of the very empire Sterling was begging for money. And he was her brother. The interior of the 2024 Bentley Flying Spur smelled of hand-stitched leather and Sterling Vance's cologne, a custom blend of oud and cold ambition. Outside, the Connecticut coastline blurred by in a streak of gray and green, but inside the cabin, the air was stagnant, heavy with unspoken threats. Ilara sat in the passenger seat, her hands resting protectively over the 7-month swell of her stomach. She was wearing a midnight blue silk gown that Sterling had selected for her. It was elegant, expensive, and a size too small. He had insisted she wear it, despite her quiet protests that the zipper was digging into her ribs. "Stop fidgeting," Sterling said, his voice low and smooth, eyes fixed on the road. "You look nervous." "Nervous looks guilty. And guilty doesn't close deals." "I can't breathe very well, Sterling," Ilara whispered, shifting slightly. "The fabric, it's tight." Sterling didn't look at her. He adjusted his grip on the steering wheel, his knuckles white. "It's a dinner with the representatives of the Hawthorne Trust, Ilara. Do you know what that means?" "It means $3 billion in capital injection for Vance Dynamics. It means we survive the quarter. It means I don't have to explain to the board why our stock dipped 12% last week. So for the love of God, suck it in and smile." Ilara looked out the window. The trees were dense here, hiding the mansions of Greenwich's elite from the prying eyes of the public. She had been living in this world for 2 years, ever since Sterling swept her off her feet. He was the CEO of a rising AI logistics firm. She was, to the world's knowledge, a nobody, a former librarian he'd met at a charity gala in Boston. Sterling loved that narrative. The prince and the pauper. It made him look benevolent. It made him look like a savior. "I'm sorry," she said automatically. It was a reflex now. "Just don't embarrass me," Sterling snapped. "These people are old money. They smell weakness. The Hawthorne family has been controlling American shipping and logistics since the 1800s. They are private, reclusive, and incredibly judgmental. If you spill water, if you say something stupid, if you act like the breathless little librarian I found you as, the deal is dead." Ilara bit her lip. "I won't say a word." "Good." What Sterling didn't know, what Ilara had spent 2 years carefully hiding, was that the Hawthorne Trust wasn't just a faceless entity to her. The name Hawthorne was the reason she had left home at 18, changing her name, dyeing her hair, and disappearing into the anonymity of the library system. She wasn't Ilara Vance, the poor librarian. She was Ilara Hawthorne, the runaway heiress to the very fortune Sterling was desperate to secure, and the reclusive family he was terrified of. They were the father who had disowned her for refusing an arranged marriage, and the brother she hadn't seen in 7 years. A sharp pain kicked in her ribs, the baby moving. Or maybe it was dread. "Who are we meeting exactly?" Ilara asked, her voice trembling slightly. "2 senior partners from the trust," Sterling said, checking his reflection in the rearview mirror. "And apparently they're bringing a consultant. Some family liaison. It doesn't matter who they are. What matters is that I charm them, and you look like the devoted, happy wife of a successful visionary." He reached over and squeezed her thigh. It wasn't affectionate. It was a grip hard enough to leave a bruise. "Happy. Do you understand?" "Yes, Sterling." The car turned onto the long gravel driveway of the Gilded Oak Country Club. This was the most exclusive club in the state. Membership wasn't bought, it was inherited. Sterling had been on the wait list for 5 years and had only been granted a guest pass for tonight because the Hawthorne representatives requested this specific venue. As the valet opened the door, the humidity of the summer evening hit Ilara, contrasting with the Bentley's air-conditioned chill. She stepped out, her heels sinking slightly into the plush red carpet laid out for the evening's event. Sterling was instantly by her side, his hand on the small of her back. To the onlookers, it was a gesture of support. To Ilara, it was a steering mechanism. He pushed her forward. "Chin up," he hissed through a smile as they approached the massive oak doors. "Showtime." The Gilded Oak was a cathedral of excess. High-vaulted ceilings, chandeliers the size of small cars, and walls lined with oil paintings of men who had died 100 years ago. The room smelled of old money, wax, polished wood, and expensive scotch. Sterling navigated the room like a shark in a koi pond. He nodded to a senator, winked at a hedge fund manager, all while propelling Ilara toward the private dining alcove near the bar. "There they are," Sterling murmured. Seated at a round table were 2 men in grey suits, the lawyers for the trust. But Ilara's eyes didn't land on them. Her gaze drifted past the table toward the bar. The bar at the Gilded Oak was legendary, a massive stretch of polished obsidian. Behind it stood a single bartender. He was tall, with broad shoulders that strained against the white dress shirt of his uniform. His sleeves were rolled up to the elbows, revealing forearms roped with muscle and a distinct, jagged scar running down his left wrist. He was shaking a martini with a rhythmic, bored precision. He had a scruffy beard, unusual for the strict grooming standards of the club, and his dark hair fell over his forehead. Ilara's breath hitched. The bartender looked up. His eyes were a piercing, icy blue. They locked onto hers across the room. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just stopped shaking the mixer for a fraction of a second, his gaze flicking from Ilara's terrified face to the hand Sterling had clamped on her arm. It was Julian. Julian Hawthorne. Her older brother. The billionaire playboy who had vanished from the tabloids 3 years ago after a motorcycle accident. The rumors said he was in rehab or dead or living on a private island. He was tending bar. Ilara's. Sterling's voice was sharp. Stop staring at the help. She snapped her head back. I just need some water. Sit down, Sterling commanded, pulling out her chair. The dinner began as an interrogation. The two lawyers, Mr. Henderson and Mr. Clark, were polite but cold. They asked about Vance Dynamics' supply chain, the overhead costs, the recent lawsuits regarding employee treatment. Sterling fielded every question with his trademark charisma, spinning losses into strategic investments and lawsuits into baseless envy. Ilara sat in silence, picking at her salad. She could feel Julian's eyes on her. Every time the waiter came by to refill wine, she checked the bar. Julian was watching. He was wiping down a glass, but his body was angled toward their table. And Mrs. Vance, Mr. Henderson said, turning his vulture-like gaze on her. How do you find the lifestyle? It must be quite a change from your previous employment. Sterling laughed, a sharp barking sound. Oh, Ilara loves it. She was made for this life. The library was just a quaint little phase. She's much happier being taken care of, aren't you, darling? He kicked her foot under the table. Hard. Yes, Ilara said softly. Sterling takes very good care of me. She's currently overseeing our charitable foundation, Sterling lied smoothly. Focusing on orphans. Very touching work. Mr. Clark took a sip of his wine. Interesting. The Hawthorne Trust values honesty above all else, Mr. Vance. We find that a man who lies to his wife often lies to his investors. Sterling's smile faltered for a microsecond. I assure you, transparency is our core value. We'll see, Clark said. Our principal is running late, but he will be joining us shortly to make the final decision. The principal? Sterling asked, perking up. I thought you two had power of attorney. We do, Henderson said. But for a deal of this magnitude, the family likes to have a personal look. Sterling looked thrilled. He downed his scotch. Excellent. I look forward to meeting him. He turned to Ilara. See, it's going perfectly. But the tension was rising. Sterling was drinking too much, his third scotch in 30 minutes. When he drank, the charm began to dissolve, revealing the nastiness underneath. Ilara, Sterling said, noticing her full glass. The veneer was cracking. He leaned in close, his breath hot and boozy in her ear. You are embarrassing me. Pick up the glass. Sterling, please, she pleaded, her voice cracking. I said, pick it up. Ilara's hand shook as she reached for the water glass, trying to bypass the wine. But her nerves were shot. Her fingers fumbled. The heavy crystal goblet tipped over. Splash! Ice water flooded the table. It soaked the white tablecloth and dripped squarely onto Sterling's pristine tuxedo pants. The silence was instantaneous. Sterling jumped up, his chair screeching against the floor. You clumsy cow, he roared. The entire dining room went quiet. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Mr. Henderson and Mr. Clark exchanged a look of pure disgust, not at Ilara, but at Sterling. Sterling, I'm so sorry, Ilara gasped, grabbing a napkin and trying to dab at the table. I didn't mean to. Don't touch it, Sterling swatted her hand away. His face was beet red. The humiliation of being wet, combined with the stress of the deal and the alcohol, caused him to snap. He forgot where he was. He forgot the investors. He only saw the woman he owned, making him look foolish. You are useless, he spat, his voice carrying across the room. I dress you up, I bring you here, and you can't even hold a damn glass. You're pathetic. Please, everyone is staring, Ilara sobbed quietly, tears welling up. Let them stare, Sterling shouted. Let them see what I have to put up with. He grabbed her arm, digging his fingers into the soft flesh. Look at me when I'm talking to you. Ilara tried to pull away. You're hurting me. I'll show you hurt, Sterling snarled. And then he did the unthinkable. In the middle of the Gilded Oak Country Club, in front of the most powerful people in Connecticut, Sterling Vance pulled back his hand and slapped his pregnant wife across the face. The sound was sickeningly loud. Ilara stumbled back, clutching her cheek, her eyes wide with shock. She lost her balance and fell to the carpeted floor with a heavy thud. For 3 seconds, there was absolute silence. Sterling stood there, breathing heavily, adjusting his cufflinks, realizing too late what he had just done. He looked around, expecting to see fear. Instead, he heard the sound of glass shattering. Behind the bar, a heavy crystal mixing glass had been crushed in a human hand. Julian Hawthorne vaulted over the bar. He didn't run, he stalked. He moved with a predatory grace that terrified anyone in his path. He pushed past a waiter, knocking a tray of oysters to the ground, his eyes fixed solely on Sterling Vance. Hey! Sterling shouted, seeing the bartender approaching. Security! Get this staff member away from me. Julian didn't stop. He reached the table in seconds. Sterling puffed out his chest. Do you know who I am? I'm a paying guest. I'll have your job for... Julian didn't let him finish. He didn't throw a punch. He simply reached out, grabbed Sterling by the throat with his scarred hand, and lifted the CEO off his feet. He slammed Sterling onto the wet table, scattering the silverware. You, Julian whispered, his voice a low rumble that sounded like tectonic plates shifting, have just made the last mistake of your life. Sterling Vance clawed at the hand, crushing his windpipe. His legs kicked uselessly against the air, his polished dress shoes scuffing the expensive mahogany table. His face was turning a mottled shade of plum, eyes bulging as he stared up into the face of the man he had dismissed as a servant just moments ago. "Let go," Sterling wheezed. Security guards rushed into the dining hall, burly men in black suits with earpieces. They pushed through the crowd of stunned socialites. "Hey, back off," the head of security, a man named Miller, shouted as he approached the table. He reached for his baton. Sterling, gasping for air, felt a surge of relief. "Arrest him," he choked out, pointing a shaking finger at Julian. But Miller didn't unholster his weapon. He stopped dead in his tracks 3 feet away. He looked at the bartender, at the scar on his hand, the cold fury in his eyes, and then he looked at the terrified club manager who had just sprinted into the room. The manager, a nervous man named Mr. Abernathy, was pale as a sheet. He waved his hands frantically at the security team. "Stand down." Miller, stand down immediately. "But sir," Miller stammered, confused. "He's assaulting a guest." "That is not a staff member." Abernathy hissed, his voice trembling. Julian loosened his grip just enough for Sterling to suck in a ragged breath, but he didn't let go. He leaned down, his nose inches from Sterling's. "You asked for security. Here they are. Tell them to remove me." Sterling coughed, massaging his throat as he sat up on the ruined table, wine soaking into his pants. He looked at the security guards, who were now standing with their hands clasped behind their backs, looking at the floor. Looked at Mr. Abernathy, who was bowing his head toward the bartender. "What is this?" Sterling demanded, his voice raspy but gaining strength. He tried to regain his composure, straightening his jacket. "I am going to sue this club into oblivion. I want this man arrested for attempted murder. Do you hear me? And you." He turned to the 2 lawyers, Henderson and Clark, who were still sitting calmly amidst the wreckage. "Why are you just sitting there? Call the police." "Mr." Henderson dabbed his mouth with a linen napkin. He looked bored. "We don't call the police on our employer, Mr. Vance. It's bad for morale." Sterling froze. "Your employer." Henderson gestured to the man in the bartender's apron. "Mr. Vance, allow me to formally introduce you to Mr. Julian Hawthorne, the chairman of the Hawthorne Trust. The man whose money you've been begging for." The world seemed to tilt on its axis for Sterling. The blood drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. He looked at the scruffy bartender. No, that's impossible. Julian Hawthorne is. He's a recluse. He's right here," Julian said. His voice was calm now, which made it infinitely more terrifying. His voice was calm now, which made it infinitely more terrifying. He stepped back from the table, and ripped off his apron, throwing it onto Sterling's lap. Underneath, he wore a white dress shirt stained with drink mix, but he wore it like armor. Julian didn't look at Sterling again. He turned on his heel and walked toward the woman sobbing on the floor. Ilara was trying to push herself up, but her dress was tangled, and the shock had robbed her of her strength. She flinched when she saw the shadow loom over her, expecting another blow. "Eli," Julian said softly. "The nickname from their childhood." Ilara looked up, tears streaming down her bruised cheek. "Jules." The entire room watched in stunned silence as the terrifying bartender dropped to his knees. The rage vanished from his face, replaced by a heartbreaking tenderness. He reached out, his scarred hand hovering over her cheek, afraid to touch the red mark Sterling had left. "I'm here," Julian whispered. "I've got you." I didn't want you to see me like this," Ilara sobbed, collapsing into his chest. "I'm so sorry." "You have nothing to be sorry for," Julian said, wrapping his arms around her and lifting her effortlessly from the floor. He glared at the crowd of onlookers, the senators, the CEOs, the gossip queens. "Show's over. Turn around." The command was absolute. Dozens of the wealthiest people in the state instantly averted their eyes, terrified of crossing the man who owned half the city. Julian carried his pregnant sister toward the exit, passing the table where Sterling sat paralyzed. Sterling scrambled off the table. His brain was misfiring, trying to salvage the situation. "Wait, Julian. Mr. Hawthorne. Listen, this is a misunderstanding. A domestic dispute. Passion of the moment. You're a man of the world, you understand stress." Julian stopped. He didn't turn around. He just spoke to the security chief, Miller. "Miller." "Yes, Mr. Hawthorne. Remove the trash from my club." "And Miller." "So, if he speaks again, break his jaw." Miller stepped forward, a grim smile on his face. He grabbed Sterling by the expensive lapels of his tuxedo. "With pleasure, sir." "Wait. Ilara." "Ilara, tell him," Sterling screamed as he was dragged backward. Henderson stood up, collected his briefcase, and looked at his colleague. "Well," he said dryly, "I believe the due diligence phase is complete. I'll draft the rejection letter." "Make it a cease and desist," Clark replied. "And call the fraud division." Julian kicked open the door to the manager's office, a plush private suite on the second floor overlooking the golf course. He gently set Ilara down on the leather sofa. "Get ice," Julian barked at Mr. Abernathy, who was hovering in the doorway. "And a medical kit." "Now." Abernathy vanished. Ilara was shaking. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by a cold, seeping shame. She pulled the shawl of her dress tighter around herself, trying to hide the baby bump, trying to hide everything. Julian pulled a chair close to her. He poured a glass of water from a pitcher on the desk and handed it to her. His hands, usually so steady, were trembling slightly. "Drink," he said. She took a sip, her teeth chattering against the glass. "You look different with the beard," she whispered. "You look..." Julian stopped. He looked at the bruise darkening on her cheekbone. His jaw clenched so hard a muscle popped. "I'm going to kill him, Ilaris. I'm going to go back down there and I'm going to finish it." "No," she said quickly, grabbing his wrist. "No, Jules. Please. He's powerful. He has lawyers. He'll twist it. He always twists it. He has lawyers." Julian let out a dark, humorless laugh. "Ilara, I own the firm that employs his lawyers. I own the bank that holds his mortgage. I own the media conglomerate that prints the news he reads. He has nothing." He looked at her, his blue eyes searching hers. "Why didn't you call me? 7 years, Ilara. Not a word. I hired private investigators. I chased leads in Paris, in Tokyo. I thought you were dead. I wanted to be free. Father, the expectations, the arranged marriage to that oil tycoon. I couldn't breathe, Julian. I just wanted to be normal. I wanted to be Ilara Vance, the librarian. Not Ilara Hawthorne, the asset. So you ran away to marry a man who treats you like an asset anyway." Julian asked his. "I'm sorry. That was low. He wasn't like this in the beginning," Ilara defended weakly. It was the classic defense of the battered. "He was charming. He was driven. He made me feel chosen. Not because of my name, he didn't know my name, but because of me. He's a narcissist, Ilara. I've been watching him for 6 months." Ilara froze. "What?" Julian stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the darkness. When Vance Dynamics applied for the capital injection, I recognized the name on his personal file. Spouse Ilara Vance, I saw the photo. "You knew where I was for 6 months and you didn't come for me. I wanted to be sure," Julian said, turning back to her. "I wanted to respect your choice. If you were happy, if you had found loves. I was going to sign the check, approve the loan, and let you live your life. I was going to be the silent benefactor." He paced the room. "But then I dug deeper. I saw the turnover rate at his company. I saw the lawsuits he settled quietly. I saw the way he spent money he didn't have. So I decided to test him. I told the lawyers to set the meeting here. I took the shift at the bar. I wanted to see the man who stole my sister." He gestured to the door. "I expected him to be arrogant. I expected him to be greedy. I didn't expect that." The door opened and Mr. Abernathy returned with an ice pack and a first aid kit. Julian took them and dismissed him. He sat back down and gently pressed the ice pack to Ilara's face. She hissed in pain, then leaned into the cold relief. Does he know? Julian asked. About the money. About who you really are. No, Ilara said. I never told him. I was terrified that if he knew, he'd only love me for the money. Irony, right? He doesn't love you, Ilara, Julian said bluntly. He loves possession. He's the father of my baby, she whispered, her hand resting on her stomach. Julian's gaze dropped to her belly. His expression softened, a mix of wonder and fierce protectiveness. And that baby is a hawthorn, which means that baby is heir to an empire. And Sterling Vance is never going to touch either of you ever again. He won't let go easily, Jules. He needs the money. He's desperate. He says the company is going under without the Hawthorne injection. The company is already dead. Julian said coldly. I just texted my CFO. We're pulling the term sheet. Phone buzzed in her purse. Then it buzzed again. And again. A relentless stream of notifications. She pulled it out. 15 missed calls, Sterling. Then a text message popped up. Sterling, you ungrateful bitch. You set me up. You knew he was there. You think you can humiliate me. I'm going to the press. I'm going to tell them you're unstable. I'll take the kid, Ilara. I have the best lawyers in New York. You'll never see this baby. Pick up the phone. Ilara's hands shook so hard she dropped the phone. He's going to take the baby. He always said he would if I ever left. He said he'd prove I was mentally incompetent. Julian picked up the phone. He read the message. His face didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He typed a reply. This isn't Ilara. This is Julian. If you contact her again, I won't use lawyers. I'll use the guys I grew up with in boarding school who now run the cartel divisions in Mexico. Do the math, Sterling. He hit send and then blocked the number. He's bluffing, Julian told her. But he is dangerous because he's cornered. We need to get you out of here. Not to your house. Somewhere safe. I have nowhere to go, Ilara cried. My clothes, the nursery. Everything is at the penthouse. You have a home, Ilara, Julian said firmly. The Hawthorne estate. Dad died 2 years ago. It's just me. And it's a fortress. Dad's dead. The news hit her like a physical blow. She hadn't known. Heart attack, Julian said, his voice thick with regret. He asked for you at the end. He wanted to apologize. He was a stubborn old mule, but he loved you. Ilara wept then, a deep, guttural sound of mourning for the wasted years. Julian held her, letting her ruin his shirt with tears and snot, rocking her back and forth. We leave tonight, Julian said. I have the helicopter coming to the golf course helipad. But Sterling, Let him try to stop a helicopter, Julian said. But as they stood up to leave, the office phone on the desk rang. It was the internal line. Julian picked it up. What? It was Miller, the security chief. His voice was urgent. Mr. Hawthorne, we have a situation. We escorted Vance out, but he's making a scene in the parking lot. He's live streaming. Live streaming. Julian frowned. Yes, sir. On Instagram. He has 2 million followers. He's standing by your Bentley, Mrs. Vance's Bentley, and he's screaming that you kidnapped his wife. He's claiming you and the Hawthorne Trust are holding her hostage to extort his company. The press is already pulling up to the main gate. Julian cursed. He's spinning the narrative. He's playing the victim. He's rallying a mob, sir. He's telling them to storm the club to save his pregnant wife. Ilara went pale. He's good at this, Julian. He manipulates perception. That's his whole career. AI and perception. Julian looked at Ilara. Then we don't hide. If he wants a show, we give him a show. But we control the script. What are you going to do? Julian buttoned his cuffs. I'm going to go down there. And I'm going to introduce the world to the real Sterling Vance. I'm coming with you, Ilara said, wiping her eyes. No, it's too stress. He's my husband, Ilara said, her voice finding a steel core she hadn't felt in years. And this is my fight too. I'm not running anymore, Jules. I'm a Hawthorne. Julian looked at her, seeing the fire of their father in her eyes for the first time. He nodded slowly. Okay, he said. Let's go break the internet. The parking lot of the Gilded Oak Country Club had transformed into a circus. The pristine gravel, usually reserved for Jaguars and Porsches, was now bathed in the strobe light chaos of police cruisers and the harsh lead glare of news vans. Sterling Vance stood on the hood of his own Bentley, a modern-day prophet of deceit. He held his phone out on a gimbal, the screen illuminating his face in a ghostly white light. Behind him, the comments on his Instagram Live were scrolling so fast they were a blur. Hearts, angry emojis, and demands for justice. They are in there right now. Sterling shouted at the phone, his voice cracking with practiced emotion. The 1%, the elite. They think they can take whatever they want. They took my wife. My pregnant wife. They are holding her in the manager's office because I refused to sign their predatory loan terms. A crowd had gathered at the gates, paparazzi who sniffed blood, local rubberneckers, and a few of Sterling's tech bro sycophants who had driven over from the city. Let her go. Let her go, the small crowd chanted, fueled by Sterling's frenzy. Inside the club entrance, Julian watched the feed on Miller's iPad. His face was unreadable, a mask of cold granite. He's getting traction, Miller warned, tapping the screen. 300,000 viewers. He's framing this as a class war. You, the billionaire, stealing the wife of the hard-working entrepreneur. The police are hesitant to breach the club, but they're pressuring us to bring Mrs. Vance out to prove she's safe. He wants a spectacle, Julian said low. He thinks if he makes enough noise, I'll back down to avoid a scandal. Ilara stood beside her brother. She had cleaned her face, but the bruise on her cheek was darkening, a violent purple blooming against her pale skin. She had refused to cover it with makeup. "I'm ready," Ilara said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it didn't shake. "You don't have to go out there," Julian reminded her. "We can take the back exit, get to the helicopter. I can have my legal team issue a statement." "No," Ilara said, tightening her grip on her shawl. "A statement is just paper. He's winning because he's telling a story. I need to finish the story." Julian nodded once. He signaled to Miller. "Open the doors." The heavy oak doors swung open. The flashbulbs were blinding. A wall of noise hit them instantly. Shouts, questions, the whir of cameras. Julian stepped out first, his presence so commanding that the nearest photographers instinctively took a step back. He didn't look like a bartender anymore. He looked like a king walking into battle. He reached back and took Ilara's hand. When Ilara stepped into the light, a hush rippled through the front row of the crowd. They saw the dress. They saw the baby bump. And they saw the bruise. Sterling, still perched on the Bentley, didn't see the bruise from that distance. He only saw his prop. "There she is," Sterling roared at his phone, panning the camera toward them. "Look. Look at her face. She's terrified. They've probably drugged her." He jumped off the car and sprinted toward the police line, holding the phone high. "Officer, that man is kidnapping my wife. Arrest him." The police captain, a weary man named O'Malley, stepped forward, hand on his holster. "Mr. Hawthorne, we need to verify the safety of Mrs. Vance." "I am safe, Captain," Ilara said. Her voice was amplified by the silence of the crowd. Sterling pushed past the police line, utilizing the confusion. He rushed up the steps, stopping 6 feet from them, the phone camera pointed directly at Ilara's face. "Ilara, baby, don't be scared," Sterling crooned, performing for the audience of millions now watching. "I'm here. I'm going to get you away from these monsters. Just tell the camera. Tell them he wouldn't let you leave." He reached out a hand. "Come to me." Ilara didn't move. She stared at the man she had shared a bed with for 2 years. She saw the sweat on his upper lip, the desperate mania in his eyes. She realized for the first time that he looked small. "I'm not coming with you, Sterling," she said clearly. Sterling's smile faltered. He laughed nervously. "Honey, you're in shock. It's the hormones. You're confused. This man," he pointed an accusing finger at Julian, "he's brainwashing you. Tell them who he is." "I know who he is," Ilara said. "He's my brother." The comment section on the live stream froze for a microsecond before exploding. "Brother? What? Sterling blinked. What? No. You're an orphan. You told me. I told you what I needed to tell you to escape my family's shadow, Ilara said, stepping closer to the phone camera. My name isn't Ilara Vance. It's Ilara Hawthorne. Sterling's phone wavered in his hand. The color drained from his face. Hawthorne. The man you assaulted tonight, Ilara continued, her voice gaining strength, is Julian Hawthorne. The owner of this club. The owner of the bank holding your debts. And my brother. Sterling looked from Ilara to Julian. The puzzle pieces slammed together. The rejection from the trust. The bartender's eyes. The sheer power radiating off the man in the white shirt. Are you? You lied to me, Sterling stammered, trying to twist the narrative again. You lied to me for 2 years. I married a fraud. He turned to the phone. You see this? She deceived me. She's the liar. I lied about my name, Ilara said. She reached up and let the shawl drop from her shoulders. She turned her face so the harsh police lights illuminated the swelling, purple bruise on her cheekbone. The crowd gasped. A collective intake of breath that sounded like a vacuum. But I'm not lying about this, Ilara said, pointing to the mark. Or about what you did to me in that dining room an hour ago. Sterling panicked. She fell. She fainted. I tried to catch her. She's clumsy, she. Stop, Julian said. It was a single word, spoken with the weight of an anvil. Julian stepped in front of Ilara. He looked directly into the lens of Sterling's phone. You're streaming, right, Sterling? Julian asked calmly. 2 million people watching. The world is watching your corruption, Sterling spat, though he was backing away. Good, Julian said. Then let's show them the replay. Julian snapped his fingers. Above the entrance of the Gilded Oak Country Club, a massive projection screen, usually used for tournament scoreboards, flickered to life. It was bright enough to outshine the police lights. What is that? Sterling whispered. The Gilded Oak has 4K security cameras in every room, Julian said, his voice carrying over the crowd. Including the private dining alcove. On the massive screen, a high-definition video began to play. It was time-stamped 1 hour ago. The crowd, the police, and the millions watching Sterling's own live stream, which was now capturing the projection screen, watched in silence. They saw Sterling drinking. They saw him leaning in aggressively. They saw him grab Ilara's arm. They saw the glass spill. And then they saw it. The slap was even more brutal on the big screen. The way Sterling wound up, the force of the impact, the way Ilara crumpled to the floor. The video showed Sterling standing over her, screaming, not helping. It showed Julian vaulting the bar. The silence in the parking lot was deafening. It was the silence of a mob, realizing they had been cheering for a monster. Sterling watched himself on the screen. He lowered his phone. The live stream comments were no longer hearts. They were skulls. They were vomit emojis. They were death threats. Wife beater. Monster. Jail him. That's edited, Sterling stammered, backing toward his Bentley. Deepfake. It's AI. It's AI. I run an AI company. I know how easy this is to fake. Mr. Vance, Captain O'Malley said, his tone entirely different now. He walked past the police line, handcuffs unclipped from his belt. Stay back, Sterling shouted. He looked wild, cornered. She provoked me. You didn't see what she did. She embarrassed me in front of the investors. So you admit it wasn't a deepfake? Julian asked dryly. Sterling froze. He had just confessed. You set me up. Sterling hissed at Julian. You planned this. You trapped me. Think about the stock price. If I go to jail, Vance Dynamics hits zero. Our child will have nothing. Ilara looked at him with a profound sadness. Not because she loved him, but because she mourned the time she had wasted on a hollow man. Our child will have a mother who stood up for herself, Ilara said. And an uncle who loves them. We don't need your money, Sterling. We have plenty of our own. You can't do this to me, Sterling screamed. He lunged toward her, a last desperate attempt to regain control, to grab her, to use her as a shield. He never made it. Julian moved with a speed that blurred in the camera flashes. He didn't punch Sterling. He simply swept his leg, kicking Sterling's feet out from under him. Sterling hit the gravel hard, face first. Before he could scramble up, Julian's knee was in the small of his back, pinning him to the earth. Julian leaned down, his voice a whisper only Sterling could hear. If you ever say her name again, if you ever look in the direction of my niece or nephew, I will bury you under so many lawsuits you won't even be able to afford the air you breathe in prison. Get off me, Sterling sobbed into the dirt. Julian stood up and stepped back, dusting off his hands. He nodded to Captain O'Malley. He's all yours, Captain. Two officers hauled Sterling to his feet. They slammed him against the side of his beloved Bentley. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut was the most satisfying sound Ilara had ever heard. Ilara, don't let them take me. I love you, Sterling screamed as they shoved him into the back of a squad car. Ilara didn't flinch. She turned her back on him. Julian put his arm around her shoulders. You okay? No, Ilara said honestly, trembling as the adrenaline crashed. But I will be. Mr. Hawthorne. Mrs. Vance. The press surged forward against the barricades, shouting questions. Is it true you're the Hawthorne heiress? Will you press charges? What about the baby? Julian looked at the sea of vultures. He looked at his sister, who was holding her stomach, exhausted. Miller, Julian said. So, get the car. We are done here. As the squad car drove Sterling Vance away to a holding cell, and his company's stock began to freefall. In the after-hours markets, Julian led Ilara back toward the club. They didn't go back into the chaos. They walked around the side, toward the manicured darkness of the golf course, where the thump-thump-thump of a helicopter rotor was beginning to cut through the night air. Ilara looked up at the stars. For the first time in 2 years, the sky didn't look like a ceiling. It looked like open space. Julian. Yes. You make a terrible bartender, she joked weakly. Your martinis are too watery. Julian laughed, a genuine, warm sound that broke the last of the tension. I'll stick to hostile takeovers then. 6 months had passed since the night the Gilded Oak Country Club became the stage for the most spectacular downfall in the history of the American elite. The winter of 2025 had descended upon the Berkshire Mountains, coating the sprawling Hawthorne estate in a thick, silent blanket of white. Inside the manor, the air was warm, smelling of cedarwood and the faint, sweet scent of chamomile. Ilara sat in a deep velvet armchair in the sunroom, her silhouette framed by the frosted floor-to-ceiling windows. In her arms lay Leo, a 3-week-old bundle of soft breaths and tiny, grasping fingers. He was a Hawthorne through and through, possessing the dark, thick hair of his uncle and a quiet, observant gaze that seemed far too wise for an infant. She looked down at him and felt a peace so profound it almost felt foreign. For 2 years, her life had been a series of calculated breaths, an endless tightrope walk over the abyss of Sterling Vance's temper. Now, the only thing she had to calculate was the time between Leo's feedings. The heavy oak door creaked open, and Julian stepped in. He had traded the bartender's white shirt and scarred-knuckle grit for a charcoal cashmere sweater and the relaxed posture of a man who had finally brought his lost sheep back to the fold. He carried 2 steaming mugs of tea, setting one on the small table beside Ilara. He's finally asleep, Julian whispered, his voice low and rhythmic. Finally, Ilara smiled, brushing a thumb over Leo's velvet cheek. He's stubborn, Julian. He fought the nap for an hour. He's a Hawthorne, Julian said, taking a seat across from her. We don't like missing out on the action. It's a genetic defect. He took a slow sip of his tea, his gaze drifting to the snow-covered valley beyond the glass. The silence between them was comfortable, a far cry from the jagged, fearful silences Ilara had endured in the Greenwich penthouse. Sterling's legal team tried a last-ditch effort. From his cell in the correctional facility, he attempted to file for emergency parental visitation rights. He claimed that denying him access to his son was a violation of his civil liberties and a strategic move by the Hawthorne family to alienate his heir. Ilara's grip on Leo tightened instinctively. The baby let out a soft, dreaming huff. He never gives up, does he? Even after the evidence, the video, the fraud charges. He still thinks he can win. He thinks he can manipulate the law the way he manipulated people, Julian said, a cold spark igniting in his icy blue eyes. But he forgot who he was dealing with. I didn't even let the motion reach a judge's desk. Henderson sent a friendly packet of information to Sterling's lead counsel. It contained the full digital trail of the offshore accounts Sterling used to embezzle funds from Vance Dynamics, along with the sworn affidavits from the two women he was paying hush money to during your pregnancy. Julian leaned forward, his expression resolute. The motion for custody was withdrawn within 20 minutes. His lawyers are now advising him to take a plea deal for the battery charges, just to keep the fraud investigators from digging any deeper. He's finished, Eli. He's never going to touch you or this boy ever again. Ilara let out a breath she felt she had been holding since that night at the club. I used to think that being a Hawthorne was a curse, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. I thought the name was a target, a reason for people to want things from me. That's why I ran. I wanted to be a nobody so I could find someone who loved me for being a nobody. She looked at her brother, truly seeing the man who had spent years searching for her, who had humbled himself to work behind a bar just to catch a glimpse of the truth. But I was wrong, she continued. The name isn't a target. It's a responsibility. You showed me that money and power don't have to be tools for oppression. They can be a shield. They can be a way to build a fortress for the people who can't build their own. You're the one who built the fortress, Ilara, Julian replied softly. I just provided the bricks. You stood up in that parking lot. You showed the world your scars so other women wouldn't have to hide theirs. Do you know how many people have reached out to the foundation since the video went viral? Ilara nodded. She was an architect of justice. The press still calls you the billionaire. Bartender, Ilara teased, trying to lighten the mood. Julian laughed, a genuine sound that echoed off the high ceilings. I actually miss the bar sometimes. It's the only place where people tell you the truth. In the boardroom, everyone is wearing a mask. Behind a bar, after 3 drinks, the masks come off. That's how I knew Sterling was a snake the second he ordered his first scotch. He treated the glass better than he treated you. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the vast estate that had been in their family for 4 generations. Dad would have been proud of you, you know. He was a hard man, and he made mistakes. God knows he made mistakes with you, but he valued courage above all else. And what you did, that was the most Hawthorne thing I've ever seen. Ilara rose from her chair, gently placing the sleeping Leo into the hand-carved mahogany bassinet nearby. She walked over to her brother and tucked her head under his shoulder. What happens now? She asked. Now. Julian wrapped an arm around her. Now we live. We run the empire. We raise that boy to be a man who never raises a hand to a woman. And we make sure the Hawthorne name stands for something more than just a balance sheet. Outside, the sun began to set, casting long, golden shadows across the snow. The nightmare of Sterling Vance was a closed chapter, a dark footnote in a much grander story. Ilara Hawthorne was no longer running. She was home. And as she watched the quiet beauty of the winter evening, she knew that the slap that had once shattered her world had actually been the sound of her breaking free. The librarian was gone. The heiress had returned. And the bartender was standing guard, ensuring that for the first time in her life, Ilara was truly, undeniably safe. Some people think that money can hide the truth, but in the end, the truth has a way of pouring out. Sterling Vance thought he could own a person just because he owned a company, but he forgot one thing: you never know who is watching from behind the bar. Ilara Hawthorne found her voice, Julian Hawthorne found his sister, and a bully found out exactly what happens when you touch a family that knows how to fight back. If you enjoyed this story of justice, family, and the ultimate billionaire reveal, make sure to hit that like button right now. It helps us bring you more incredible stories just like this one. Don't forget to share this video with someone who loves a good twist ending, and subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a beat of the drama. What would you have done if you were the bartender? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.